The funeral was quiet, as if the world had dimmed itself out of respect. Rain fell in soft sheets against the tent overhead, a hush that blurred everything. The voices, the prayers, the sound of my own breath. I sat rigid between my cousin and a woman whose presence felt both familiar and distant. It wasn't until she reached to hand me a tissue, one hand still trembling slightly, that I recognized her. Elena, my mother's best friend. I hadn't seen her in nearly a decade. She looked almost the same. Dark eyes, sharper than memory made them. Her hair was longer now, streaked with silver, pulled back in a simple twist. She wore a black dress that looked like it had been hanging in a closet too long, waiting for a day like this. She didn't cry, not in the loud, collapsed way my aunt did. But I could feel the sadness coming off her in waves, quiet and controlled, like someone grieving through glass. After the service, as everyone began dispersing, hugs, murmured condolences, casseroles loaded into the back seat of cars, my dad motioned me over. He stood near a folding chair under the tree, his suit too big on his aging frame. He looked tired in a way I hadn't seen before, like the world had slipped sideways, and he didn't know how to balance anymore. I asked Elena to stay with us for a little while, he said, not looking me in the eyes. The words didn't register at first. I thought he meant for dinner. Maybe a few days. What do you mean, stay? To help with the house. The things your mom left behind. I can't do it alone, and she knows where everything is. She helped pick most of it. He cleared his throat, glancing toward where Elena stood beside the hydrangeas, speaking quietly with the priest. It won't be long, just a few weeks, until we get through the hard parts. I nodded, though I didn't understand what I was agreeing to. My hands were still cold from the rain. My mind stuck somewhere between the casket and the picture frame of my mom smiling on a table beside it. That photo, taken in the kitchen during a summer barbecue, was burned into me. I'd looked at it for too long during the service. And now, all I could think of was that Elena had probably been the one to take it. The drive home was silent. My father stared out the window, and I drove, watching the trees blur past, the wet road bending like a quiet promise ahead. When we pulled into the driveway, Elena's car was already there. Inside the house, everything smelled like lemon polish and stillness. Someone had cleaned, but it didn't matter. Grief still lived in the corners. Her coat still hung by the door. Her slippers were still near the base of the stairs. The house didn't feel empty. It felt paused. Elena brought her suitcase in later that evening, said nothing more than thank you when I helped carry it up. She was staying in the guest room at the back of the hallway, the room my mom had painted pale blue last spring. I remembered watching her lean on the ladder, brush in hand, humming along to Fleetwood Mac. That night, I lay awake in bed, listening to the faint creaks of the floorboards. The house sounded different already. Or maybe I was just noticing it more. I couldn't tell if having Elena here was meant to comfort us or confuse everything. She moved like she had permission, not in an intrusive way, but like someone who had once lived here and was just picking up again. I remembered stories about her, how she and my mom met in literature class, how they'd traveled cross-country in college, how they used to joke about living together when they were old. But we weren't old. We were broken. Around midnight. I walked into the kitchen for water. The light was on. Elena sat at the table, her back to me, sipping tea from my mother's favorite mug, the one with the faded gardenias and a hairline crack running down the handle. She turned as I entered and gave me a soft smile, tired but steady. I couldn't sleep, she said. Me neither, I replied. She didn't offer more. I didn't ask. I poured my water and stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say in a house filled with absence. You okay with me being here? She asked gently. I looked at her, really looked. There was something in her face, not quite sorrow, not quite guilt, just history, tied to mine. I don't know, I said honestly. She nodded like she understood, like that was the only answer I could have given. And then, just like that, we both returned to our separate silences. The tea steam curled upward between us. The night held its breath. The days fell into each other, soft and indistinct, like pages of a book I didn't remember opening. Elena moved through the house, like someone walking through a dream she wasn't ready to wake from. She never rushed, never made noise for the sake of filling the air. She wasn't trying to be a replacement. If anything, she moved with too much care, like she didn't want to disturb anything that had been my mother's. Asterisk, she started cleaning the kitchen first. Not scrubbing or reorganizing. More like tidying the edges of what still remained. She lined up the spice jars, wiped down the old wooden cutting board, refolded dish towels that had already been folded. I walked in one morning to find her, gently running her fingers along the edge of the fridge, where a few faded magnets still held old grocery lists and a picture of me at 17 holding a sparkler on the 4th of July. She didn't say anything, just smiled quietly and went back to what she was doing. Asterisk, that afternoon, I saw the teacup. Asterisk, it was sitting on the second shelf near the window, the one my mom always used. White porcelain, tiny blue flowers, and just beneath the rim, faintly visible in the light, a smudge of lipstick. Coral pink. The same shade my mother wore when she wanted to feel like herself, as she used to say. The cup had been washed, surely, but somehow that mark had survived. A ghost of a kiss that refused to fade. Asterisk, Elena didn't touch it. She dusted around it and left it in place. Asterisk, she spent most mornings outside in the garden, trimming dead leaves, watering the pots along the fence. She wore my mother's gardening gloves. I recognized the small tear near the thumb. Watching her from the upstairs window felt intrusive, yet I couldn't help it. There was something in the way she bent near the tomato plants, how she patted the soil like she was remembering something tactile and personal. Asterisk, it was late on a Thursday when I walked in and saw her folding the blanket. Asterisk, it was the old knit one. Forest green and slightly frayed, the one my mother always curled up with on movie nights. Elena sat cross-legged on the living room rug, the blanket pulled in her lap, and she was crying. Not loudly, just a few silent tears trailing down her cheek, catching on the corner of her mouth. She didn't notice me. Or maybe she did and didn't want to react. I stood there for a beat too long before backing out, not wanting to make her feel watched in a moment she clearly meant to keep private. Asterisk, the next morning, she made coffee. 2 mugs. Asterisk, we didn't talk about the night before. I just sat down at the kitchen table, and she pushed a cup toward me like it was any other day, like we'd been doing this routine for years. It wasn't my mother's mug, but it was close, one of the same set, a sibling to the cup with the lipstick. We sat there for a long while, both staring out the window at the wet grass, the way the light hit the dew and made it shimmer like frost. Asterisk, you know she hated the taste of oranges, Elena said suddenly, stirring her spoon in slow circles. Asterisk, I looked at her. Yeah, but she always bought them anyway. Asterisk, only because she thought you needed vitamin C. She smiled faintly. She was stubborn like that. Asterisk, I nodded, unsure of what else to say. But something about her words settled inside me, like a memory that hadn't surfaced in years being gently pulled back into view. Asterisk, over the next week, our conversations became a rhythm. Small things. Safe things. She told me about the time she and my mom hitchhiked through New Mexico in college. About how they once got matching tattoos that they immediately regretted and had lasered off. About how, when I was born, she was the one who drove my dad to the hospital because he'd locked the car keys inside the house. Asterisk, she didn't talk about grief. Not directly, but in every word, it lived, like an undercurrent, soft and constant. Asterisk, one night, she made us soup. The kind my mom used to make when the weather turned. Lentils, garlic, a bay leaf floating near the surface. The house smelled like it had 3 years ago, before the diagnosis, before the hospice bed, before the silence. We ate at the table with only the small lamp on, casting long shadows across our faces. Asterisk, sometimes I forget she's gone. I said suddenly. The words came out before I could weigh them. Asterisk, Elena didn't flinch. She just nodded. Asterisk, me too, she whispered. Asterisk, later, I found myself in the laundry room, digging through a basket of clean clothes. The blanket was there, folded neatly on top. I ran my fingers across the fibers. Still soft, still warm, somehow. Asterisk, it struck me then that grief wasn't loud. It didn't scream or demand. It crept. It whispered. It lingered in the spaces between words, in the smudges on cups, in the way someone touches a memory with both hands. Asterisk, and Elena, she was carrying all of it with me, without asking anything in return. Asterisk. The days stretched longer, softer. Summer leaned into the edges of fall, and the light through the windows took on that golden, syrupy hue that made the dust look like it was dancing. I'd wake early for work, find the house already breathing. With life, coffee brewing, windows cracked open to let in the cool air, and sometimes the low hum of old jazz records echoing faintly from the living room. Elena was always up before me. She didn't ask much. But she was everywhere, in the soft fold of laundry left on the chair, the open book beside the couch, the faint scent of rosemary in the kitchen. Her presence wasn't loud, just steady, like a tide that knew exactly when to rise. Coming home to her became familiar. I'd push open the door and hear music, Miles Davis, Ella Fitzgerald, sometimes just the sound of spoons against ceramic bowls as she stirred something at the stove. We didn't always speak. Sometimes I'd sit across from her at the table, both of us eating in silence, like we understood there was nothing urgent to say. Other nights, she'd ask me about my day, and I'd try to describe it in a way that wasn't just a list of facts. She made me want to notice things. The way she carried herself shifted, too. There was a stillness to her, but not the kind born of sadness. It was something deeper, something that felt like patience. She never overstepped. She never asked for anything. But she remembered things, my favorite type of bread, how I liked my eggs, the exact way my mom used to drape the blanket over the arm of the couch. One evening, I came home to find her on the porch. She was barefoot, legs tucked beneath her, wrapped in a light shawl even though the air wasn't cold yet. A candle flickered beside her, catching the edge of her cheekbone. An amber light. She held a mug between her palms like it was something fragile. Tea, she asked. I nodded and sat beside her. She handed me a second mug. Chamomile. Still hot. For a while, we said nothing. The crickets had begun their late summer chorus, and somewhere down the street a lawnmower hummed, distant and soft. I always loved this porch, she said finally. We used to sit here for hours, your mom and I, before you were born. After too. I sipped slowly, watching her eyes track some memory I couldn't see. She said this house was her body. Said if she ever left it, it would forget how to breathe. I didn't know what to say to that. So I didn't. I just listened. Elena smiled faintly. She always said I reminded her of you. And you of me. I turned to look at her, the words slipping through me like water through cloth. She didn't meet my gaze. She just stared into the candle. I didn't understand what she meant, she went on. Not at first. But I think she saw something. A rhythm. A softness. She once told me she was glad you had my eyes. That stopped me. My throat tightened, and I didn't even know why. She looked at me then, slowly. Carefully. She knew. I loved you both. The words hung there. Not heavy, not even weighted with meaning, just bare. Honest. I didn't ask what kind of love she meant. I didn't want to cage it. There was something sacred in the ambiguity. I set my mug down and leaned back against the porch post, watching the candle between us flicker as a breeze passed. The night deepened. The stars began to take shape above the trees. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like the house was echoing with something I'd lost. It just felt full, not of answers, just of presence. She didn't elaborate, and I didn't press. But something shifted that night. The air between us took on a different weight. Not desire, not yet, just an understanding. A closeness born not from circumstance, but recognition. Like we were the last two people carrying a secret someone else had stitched into both of us. Before we went inside, she looked at me again, her voice barely above the hum of the wind. Your mom would have wanted this. The stillness. The healing. I nodded. But I wasn't sure if she was talking about the house or us. Maybe both. Inside. She blew out the candle, and we walked upstairs. Not together, not apart. Just side by side, quietly. And for the first time since the funeral, I didn't feel like I was walking alone. The storm rolled in without warning. One minute the sky was a soft gray curtain, and the next it cracked open like a secret too long held. Thunder rumbled low and long, shaking the windows just enough to make the house feel fragile. I was in the kitchen when the lights flickered once, then died completely. Silence filled the air. Not empty, but charged. Elena? I called out. Asterisk, living room, she answered calmly. Asterisk, I found her kneeling by the coffee table, lighting candles. 3 of them, placed at different corners like she was drawing a soft boundary around the space. The room glowed gold, shadows stretching up the walls in lazy movements. Rain tapped steadily against the windows, and outside, the wind curled around the corners of the house like it was searching for a way in. Asterisk, looks like we're camping in, she said with a small smile. Asterisk, I sat on the couch beside her. The cushions were warm, faintly scented with rosemary and the laundry soap she'd started using. She pulled the green blanket, the same one I'd seen her fold on that quiet night, across her lap, then offered the other half to me. I hesitated for half a second, then took it. It was heavy and soft and smelled faintly like my mother. Or maybe like memory. Asterisk, the candlelight flickered between us. I could hear her breathing, slow, steady. We didn't speak at first. The silence wasn't awkward. It felt purposeful, like the room had decided we didn't need noise to understand each other. Asterisk, then, quietly, she said, I'm scared of forgetting her. Asterisk, I looked at her. The way the light brushed the curve of her cheek. The wet shine in her eyes. Asterisk, I am too, I said. Asterisk, she pulled the blanket a little tighter. It's strange. I keep thinking she's going to walk in with her keys jangling and complain about the weather. Asterisk, I laughed under my breath. She always hated storms. Asterisk, she said they made her feel like a child again. Powerless. But she loved candles. Said it reminded her to slow down. Asterisk, Elena reached forward and adjusted the flame of one that had burned too low. Her fingers were graceful, precise. I watched her in that moment and felt something rise inside me that I hadn't named before. Not attraction, exactly. Something older than that. Recognition. Asterisk, she was always braver than me, she whispered. But you have her steadiness. Asterisk, I looked down at our hands. Mine rested against the cushion, hers only inches away. Her pinky shifted slightly, then stilled again. That space between us, that quiet, felt like the center of the world. Asterisk, you know, she said softly, love isn't always the big thing. It's not grand gestures or big declarations. Asterisk, what is it then? Asterisk, she turned her head toward me. It's this, sharing silence, choosing to stay even when you're scared, letting someone see you tired, letting them see you grieving. Asterisk, the room was warm, not just from the blanket or the candles, but from something in the air. Something fragile and honest. I felt the pull toward her, not lustful, not urgent, but deep, steady. It was in the way her voice softened when she talked about my mother, in the way she always left a light on for me, even when I was late, in the way she knew when I needed space and when I didn't. Asterisk, I wanted to reach for her hand. I wanted to close that gap. Asterisk, but I didn't. Asterisk, neither did she. Asterisk, instead, we sat there with our hands almost touching, breathing the same air, listening to the storm, letting the moment stretch out, unbroken and whole. Asterisk, the lightning lit up the room once, casting her face in a flash of silver light. For a second, she looked straight at me, and I felt it. Everything she wasn't saying. Everything I wasn't saying. But nothing moved. Nothing needed to. Asterisk, the rain softened after a while. The thunder grew distant, like it had done its work, and was slipping quietly away. She leaned back into the cushions, eyes closed, her breathing slow and even. I watched her, memorizing the lines of her face in the candlelight. Asterisk, I leaned my head back too. Closed my eyes. Let myself feel full, not happy, not sad, just full. Asterisk of grief. Asterisk of memory. Asterisk of something beginning. Asterisk, and in that stillness, something between us settled into place. Not a decision, not a plan. Asterisk, just presence. Asterisk, the room stayed warm long after the storm passed. Asterisk. The smell of eggs and toast reached me before I even got to the kitchen. My father was already seated at the table, wearing the same flannel he always wore when he was trying to seem relaxed. There were 3 plates, 3 chairs. I looked over at him, and he just nodded toward the one beside him. Elena was standing by the stove, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. She didn't look surprised to see me awake early, almost like she'd expected this morning to feel different. Asterisk, we all sat down together. The clink of cutlery against ceramic was the only sound at first. No one reached for conversation. Just small bites, careful sips. A quietness that didn't feel uncomfortable, just full. My dad kept looking between the two of us like he was measuring something invisible. Asterisk finally, he put down his fork and exhaled through his nose. It wasn't dramatic. If anything, it was soft, like he was letting something go that had been sitting on his chest too long. Asterisk, I want to say something, he said, and I want to say it right. Asterisk Elena froze mid-sip. I set my fork down without meaning to. Asterisk, I know, he said, his voice low and even. That's something shifting. Between you two. Asterisk, my heart pressed hard against my ribs. Elena looked down at her plate. Asterisk, he continued. I'm not blind. And I'm not angry. Just, he looked around the kitchen, like he was taking inventory of what still felt like home. I see life coming back into this house. No one breathed for a second. I lost her too, he said quietly. But I also know how she felt about both of you. I know she'd want you to be okay. However that happens. Asterisk, there it was. The weight of guilt rising fast, like a wave, but then breaking just before it hit. In its place, something else remained. Relief, maybe, or permission, or simply the peace that comes when someone chooses grace over judgment. Asterisk Elena reached across the table and placed her hand on mine. Not to claim anything, just to offer presence. Her fingers were warm. Familiar now. Not the kind of warmth that burns, the kind that stays. Asterisk, we didn't say anything in that moment. We didn't need to. Asterisk, later that afternoon, I found her in the backyard. She was kneeling in the soil near the garden beds, a small trowel in one hand, a pot of lavender in the other. The sunlight came through the trees in scattered beams, and she looked peaceful in a way that made my chest ache. Asterisk, I walked out with a mug of coffee and handed it to her. She looked up, brushed a bit of dirt from her cheek, and smiled. Asterisk, thought this might help, I said. Asterisk, she took it, her fingers grazing mine. You always bring it just how I like it. Asterisk, strong and slightly bitter? I teased. Asterisk, she laughed softly, then turned back to the soil. Familiar and necessary. Asterisk, we didn't talk about what would come next. There was no grand plan. Just this, planting something new where something old had once bloomed. A house filled with memories, yes, but also space. Asterisk, space for mornings like this. Asterisk, space for healing. Asterisk, space for whatever would come, not as a replacement for love lost, but as proof that love could still grow. Asterisk, and for now, that was enough. Asterisk.